Thank you, Eric, and good morning to everybody who's joined in. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm Sudha Umashanker. I'm a journalist and an author, and forayed into storytelling about 12 years ago, thanks to Eric. And I also curate a lot of heritage walks, and I'm interested in history, and this workshop was inspired by that interest. And the one question that all of us storytellers, at least people like me, were confronted with in the beginning when we got into storytelling was, where are all the stories? Where do I look for stories? Do I look for anecdotes in Reader's Digest, or are they stories that I've heard from family, good raconteurs in the family, or are they from mythology? Are they from our scriptures? So that was a question that was looming large. And then I realized that you can find stories just about anywhere, even in your backyard. So I want to start off by picking your brains and asking you, where are all the stories? Where have you found the stories that you tell? You can put them on chat, or you can, put them on chat and then raise your hand and come up and come on screen and elaborate on it. So give you just a couple of minutes. Yes, there's one hand going up, Eric. Should we?
Yeah, good. That's Veena. You can.
Yes.
Good.
Veena, where?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I grew up with stories, at bedtime stories told by my father. He used to read out, not really tell, he used to read out Panchatantra.
Oh, lovely.
And Ramayan and Mahabharat. So he used to focus on Mahabharat actually. And every bedtime was a question mark as to what happens next. So it was like the Aladdin, I think, and whatever those stories.
Yes.
That you wait till tomorrow night if you finish your homework and you eat well and you clean up the table after you and all. Okay, I'm ready to tell you a story. So thanks to.
So that's a very nice bedtime ritual, I think your father had set for you. And I'm sure it must have been, it's a good thing to do it at bedtime because it stays with you, I think, and it works in your subconscious, possibly. Yes, Manjari says that sometimes in my childhood and on my travels. Manjari, would you like to add to that? I don't know if she can hear me. Manjari, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to you, Sudhaji. And good evening to the rest who are away. I, of course, enjoy mythological and stories from our scriptures. But also, I recently did a workshop on personal stories. And then I discovered that there were some memories in my childhood which I could pen down and make it into a personal story, which I enjoyed telling. And there were some things on my travels which I also wanted to pen down. And because I found them something very personal and something which I could share with others. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think personal stories are a great, a treasure within ourselves. And if we look within, I think we can unearth a lot of stories, even the difficult ones, the ones that we don't are afraid to talk about, maybe bitter experiences, abusive experiences, whatever you name them. Yeah. So I think personal stories are definitely very cathartic and also the huge treasure within us. Rachel Greenstein says, personal anecdotes and family experiences. That's lovely. I share that, thought. Rachel, would you like to elaborate on that?
I guess you could say I have a dramatic personal history. And so I'm trying to make meaning of it. And as I do that, I find it has meaning for other people. And my husband is a very funny person, and our relationship could be a stand-up comedy. So I have told anecdotes from those experiences. And I've actually written a couple of children's stories that are just from the imagination. And I haven't told them very often, but I would like to write fiction for young adults. And so I don't really do much formal storytelling now, but I tell stories whenever I talk to people.
Very interesting, Rachel, all of which you said that you have a very dramatic background, and your exchanges with your husband. I would love to listen to those, because all of us have our own stories, our equations. And like you say, it's not only very healing, and it's of interest to everybody, because and then it resonates with everyone, and they say, that's how it is for me as well. So that's lovely. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And
I actually, in an earlier workshop yesterday, when we were talking about what is your authority, I felt like I didn't have any authority, because I'm not really a personal, I'm not storytelling. I used to teach, but my license expired. I'm not teaching. So I didn't feel like I had any credentials. And the only thing I could come up with was, I tell stories from my experience, and the funny ones make people laugh, and the other ones strike a chord of truth.
I don't think you need to have any doubt about whether or not you have any authority, Rachel. I think your experiences are probably very unique. So they're yours. And if people can benefit from them as well, I think it's very
that's
valuable.
my purpose.
Yes.
That's my purpose.
And Bruce has said, from his own life and fevered imagination, much of the latter is inspired by existing stories and literature. Yes, Bruce. I'd like you to talk a wee bit more about that.
Sure. And I just want to echo what you said about Rachel absolutely having authority. Rachel is a regular at the Story Space, which is a weekly, for now, online gathering of storytellers every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States. And it's Rachel is a regular. She's been sharing stories, and she's been a delight to have aboard. So Rachel, keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
I write stories from my childhood, from my parenting experiences, from some of my outdoor adventures that I've had, and encounters with nature. And I also make up stories, fictional stories, some in prose, much of it in rhyme. I have an international rhymers group that I meet with once a month. In fact, it'll be this tomorrow, our time anyway, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. It's run by a gentleman in St. John's, Newfoundland. If anybody's interested in that, just shoot me a chat and a message, and I'll get you connected with our meeting tomorrow. It's a delightful international group, and rhyme has wonderful comic potential, and we draw a lot of inspiration from each other.
That's very wide swath, Bruce, and thank you for telling us how things work for you.
It
And
is. I'm kind of all over the place, and I find, not only that there is a wide array of material to draw from, but a wide range of expression too. I don't limit myself to, I'll tell regular stories, rhyming stories. I'll write poems. I'll write songs. Different things want to be presented in different, I think, in different ways.
which is a good thing. And although sometimes people say you need to be a specialist and be focused on focus on a particular area, but I think it's also good to be a generalist and dabble in a wide variety of things. So to go back to where we started, I always thought that there were fairy tales and folk tales and all our epics and scriptures, and that these are the places that we look for Mullah Nasruddin and Akbar and Birbal and Tenali Raman and all the folk heroes. And then there are stories from every country. Nowadays, you have anthologies of stories from almost every part of the world. And like some of us mentioned, personal stories and science fiction. There's something under every single area. So the reason I started looking at stories in my backyard was because when I started curating heritage walks, I began to look around my surroundings, the street where I lived, the street where my father's home was, or popular touristy places in Chennai. And then I realized that I knew so little about each of these places. And then when I began researching more about each of these places, I realized there was a story behind each of that. Eric, can I ask you to open the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Can we go to?
Here we go.
Yeah. Yes. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. So we've already covered this, and can we go to the next slide, Eric? And we've done this as well. The fourth one.
Next.
Yes. Next. So, so these are some triggers that I came up with. Can you think of stories in your backyard? Maybe the street where you live in, the place where you grew up, the city or town, the street where you studied, where your school is, or on a usual route you take to work or to get to somewhere. Or it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be a building or anything big. It could be just a plaque. It could be a statue. It could be an institution or a heritage building. And there's a story right there in each of those objects. Can we go to the next one, Eric? I would like to, before I let you think about some of the things that pop up in your head, I would like to share with you some of the stories on my list. Now, I live on a road that is called Harrington Road. And I started off by wondering how on earth did it get the name Harrington Road? And then I discovered that during the British times, this gentleman who was a civil servant was given a few acres of land east of the spur tank. Now, the spur tank is a tank. It's a water body that is shaped like a spur. Now, Chennai had as many as 400 odd water bodies, and now we're down to about 40 something, because many of these areas have been reclaimed, they've been built over, and a lot of areas have been developed. So as a result, we paid the price for this kind of thoughtless, mindless development when Chennai faced floods, because they found that all the lakes were built over. Many of the lakes were built over for because they needed, everybody was migrating to the big towns like Madras. Chennai was Madras at one point. So Madras, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, everybody wanted to be in the big cities where all the jobs and all the opportunities were. So there was haphazard development, and all the water bodies many of the water bodies have been destroyed and built over. So as a result, they said that when we experienced very unusual rains of the kind that we haven't had for 100 years, there was no place for the water to drain out. All the normal channels were blocked up because they'd all been built over. So houses got flooded, apartment blocks got flooded. And then people realized that they'd made a huge, huge mistake, but it was too late to reverse the damage. Anyway, that's a little bit of an aside, taking off from spur tank. So spur tank was actually a tank, a water body in the shape of a spur. It has a lot of political history to it. And south of it is Harrington Road. And there are, I've lived here for a long time, and I knew very little about some of these institutions. So I would like to tell you stories about 3 or 4 of these. One, an NGO, 2, an educational institution, and 3, a mathematician's last days, and 4, a samadhi, where a saint became one with the divine. So can we go to the next slide, Eric? Now, this is an NGO which is nearly 100 years old, and it's called the Little Sisters of the Poor. And this was opened sometime around 1930, and it was this little order was started by a French woman, a French nun called Jean. I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but it's spelled Jugan. Now, she was born at the time of the French Revolution. And it was a very, very difficult time, and Louis XVI was guillotined, and there was a lot of political upheaval. There were all churches were being converted into fodder stores for the troops. Her father was not around when she was born, and then when she was 4, he left. He was a sailor, and he never returned. Her mother made a living by working as a laundress, and everything that this little girl, Jean, learned was from her mother. She learned how to do the housework, help with the kitchen. She learned how to pray. There were no formal catechism classes or anything like that. And she was a great help for her mother. And they were a very poor family, and the times were very, very difficult. And then she began to work as a kitchen maid for a family that lived nearby in France. And this family, fortunately, was very service-minded. So they used to go out and do a lot of service and help the poor and destitute. And later on, even times were very difficult. In the UK, there was economic crisis, there was potato famine. Everything was, it was a tough life. So after a couple of years, this young girl, Jean, decided to dedicate herself to the church, and she qualified as a nurse. And she began tending to the sick. She was looking after people who had scurvy and other kinds of skin conditions. and venereal diseases. And she did that for about 6 years. And then she really got exhausted. So she hired an apartment along with another friend, and she began to take in people. And she and her friend actually lived in the loft, and she tended towards the sick and the destitute and whoever needed help. And slowly in time, she took in two other girls, one of whom was a designer, because they needed money as well to sustain. And then they decided that they would form what is called something loosely based on the third order. And so she contacted an abbé whom they knew, and he told them, he drew up kind of a charter as to what the order might be and what the rules might be. And she eventually became elected as the Mother Superior. But the Abbé, had his own ideas, and after some years, he sidelined Jean completely, and he favored the other girl that she had brought in because he thought that she would be more pliable. But Jean took this in her stride, and she continued her good work. She would actually go out and beg. And that's how she raised a lot of funds. Even today, some of the sisters go out with a begging bowl. So she would go out and beg. And then she moved out of the original place, and they moved into a bar. And then by chance, somebody sold them a convent, and which was more spacious, and they could take on more people. And she never bore any grudges towards the Abbé, although he had overlooked all her contributions. She was a great one. She had a great gift for speaking to people and gathering funds. And finally, the person that the Abbé favored, she confessed that Jean was the real foundress of this order, and it was the Abbé who fabricated this story. And in the end, the Abbé was confined to a monastery, and Jean, of course, continued her good work till she eventually lost her vision, and she died somewhere in the 1800s. And then since then, the Little Sisters, they were originally calling themselves Servants of the Poor, but Jean named the order Little Sisters of the Poor because she told people, you have to be very little. You have to be humble. If you try and act as if you are very big, then there's going to be a downfall. So that is how they got the name Little Sisters of the Poor. And now they are spread over in 30 countries. She's been canonized, and there were many miracles associated with her during a novena of prayer, as they call it. Many people were healed, and their work continues in several countries. And here at this home, they have a home for the aged. A lot of destitute people come in. There is a little chapel, and it's a wonderful institution. So there was a whole story that was waiting to be discovered about this NGO, which I knew little of when I first moved in. And had it not been for this heritage walk, I would hardly have realized any of this. Can we move on to the next slide, Eric? Yes, this is a picture of her, the foundress. And the next one. Yes, this is just a visual of their home for the aged. They have a beautiful kitchen. They have a well-equipped laundry. They have many residents there who are all well taken care of. Yes, Eric. And the next one. this is a building that is called the Crinant. Now, this is where one of the greatest mathematicians that India has produced, Srinivasa Ramanujam, I don't know how many of you have heard of him. He did seminal work in continued fractions and number theorems and all of that. He was a prodigy. He was from a very modest family. His father worked in as a clerk in a sari store. And he went to very modest schools deep down in the South. But he was a child prodigy and he showed great promise even at a young age. And it so happened that there were two lodgers in their home who were college students. So he used to borrow their books and work out all the math problems. And then he was always 3-4 steps ahead of his class. And he had such a fascination for math. And so much so that he tended to, give much less importance to any of the subjects, which is why Srinivasa Ramanujam never could graduate in a sense. And he kept on with his interest in math, and he tried to show his work to many Indian mathematicians. He didn't go too far. And then this was way back in the 1900s, when he started an email correspondence with a Professor Hardy in the University of Cambridge. And just imagine in those days, I don't know how long a post would have taken to reach, but he would work out theorems and sums and all the new things that he had formulated and send them to Hardy. And Hardy studied them. He found some of them were already proven, some were new, and some were real breakthroughs. And he was really impressed by the work. And he wanted Ramanujam to come to Cambridge. Initially, as you know, in Hindu families, there is a belief that anybody crossing the seas was a sin back in those days. So people never really traveled abroad. And his parents also worried that he might be converted because he was a staunch Hindu family. But then Hardy got other math professors to convince his family that there would be no conversion and it would be fine for him to come to Cambridge. And then there began a great association with Hardy and another professor called Littlewood. And they did path-breaking work together, published many papers. He was admitted to the Fellow of the Royal Society, and he achieved. He was awarded widely, and he really did very well. But he fell ill. Ramanujam had a bout of dysentery as a child in India, and dysentery, if not treated, could lead to amoebiasis, which is what he probably suffered from in the last days of his life. But there is a theory that he was treated for tuberculosis because they weren't very clear about the diagnosis. So it got to a point where he fell really ill. So he came back to India. And here, right off the road where I live, is this house called Crinant. Now, there was a very well-known contractor called Nambarmal Chetty who built several houses in this area and several prominent buildings in the city of Chennai, or Madras, as it was known. And they're all red brick buildings. The government buildings are all red bricked ones. And this is one of the other family homes that this Nambarmal Chetty, this contractor, built. And he was very fond of Ramanujam. So he offered him this house where he could live in. But Ramanujam didn't like the name Crinant. He thought it had some, forebodings about it. So he was very unhappy. So he was given another home opposite this house called Gometra. And that is where Ramanujam passed on. Many of Ramanujam's notebooks, which was thought to be lost, have been discovered. And he did not leave behind any children. He was married to a girl who was 10 when they got married. And then she lived in her parents' home until she came of age. And but she was very, very supportive of her husband. And Ramanujam died when he was all of 32. And he's remembered to this day because of his remarkable contributions to mathematics. And he's being feted and celebrated long after he's gone. So this was just a building with a name. And then when I delved deeper into this, I discovered the story of not only Ramanujam, but also the contractor that built this house. So all of this I find is very, very fascinating, because these are stories practically down the road, not quite in my backyard, as Eric said, but you know, just off the road street where I live. And I proudly show this building to people when I lead them on the walks. Can we go to the next slide, Eric? Yes. Now this Madras Christian College High School has links with Scotland. And somewhere around the 1800s, the Church of Scotland had a church here called St. Andrew's Kirk, not far from where I live. And there were two missionaries there. And they started a small school in an area called Vepri, which is not far from here, from where I live. And then they wanted a missionary who was also an educationist. So this missionary moved the school before it came here to a place called Armenian Street in Georgetown. And then they moved to another place called Sailor Boys Home, very close to that building. I'll tell you more about Georgetown. It's very significant during the British times. So the school remained there for some time, and then there was the Emden bombing by the German ship that happened very close to the school. And then a lot of factories came up. There was noise and dust and smoke and all of that. So they decided to move the college to a place called Tambram, and the school came here. This was called the Napier's Garden. It was completely desolate. It was overgrown with weeds, and it was all cleared up. They got sand from the river nearby, the Kuam, and there were some very, very remarkable teachers like Reverend William Miller, and then there was an Indian teacher called Kuruvilla Jacob, who really brought the school up to a great level. It became one of the most popular and sought after schools in Chennai. It was a boys' school in those days, and today it has expanded vastly. It has a huge playground. They have wonderful activities for the children. They have a school band. They have a carpentry section, scouts, guides, all of that. And so this school is really something that we owe to the Church of Scotland. And it's started somewhere in the 1800s, and it has survived, and it has grown and expanded, and it has a great history behind it. Can we go to the next slide, Eric? Yes, this is a picture of the building, the campus. And the next one, please. Yes, a huge playground. And many schools today don't have even a proper playground, and this is a big plus for this school. It's so spacious. The campus is very, very spacious. And the next slide, Eric. And this is a statue of Reverend William Miller, who put the school on a very, very sound footing. The next one, Eric. So this is a little temple of built in honor of a saint. He was a person called Gangadhara Navalar, and he was a very ardent devotee of Lord Shiva. And he had composed a number of hymns on Lord Shiva. Now, this Samadhi is also off the road where I live. And a number of miracles are attributed to him. Once it is said that he boarded a train to go somewhere for a religious discourse. And then the ticket collector came around and saw that he was traveling without a ticket, and he offloaded him. So, and then the train wouldn't start. It had developed some technical problems. And then other passengers who came to board the train noticed that this gentleman had been offloaded, and they went to the ticket collector and said, he's a very saintly, highly evolved person, and we will pay for his ticket, and please allow him to board. And which is what they did. And the moment he boarded, miraculously, the technical problems were fixed and the train started to move. And there is a very well-known temple in Chennai called the Kapalishwara temple. And he would sing, he had composed a number of hymns, and the chariot would move only after this saint sung songs in praise of Lord Shiva. So he asked the British for a small piece of land where his Samadhi could be built. And these saints choose the time and day when they want to give up their earthly form. So a huge pit is usually dug up, and they get down into the pit and meditate very deeply. And then at the appropriate time, the pit is filled over and the saint attains Samadhi. So this is exactly what happened several years ago. And there's a temple still, there are people who come there to worship. Many say that the vibrations are very, very strong. Regular pujas are held, and his family is taking care of this Samadhi temple. And this, again, is just off the road where I live. The next slide, Eric. I will just share a couple of more stories, and then you can go into the breakout room. And now this is an obelisk. Can you possibly enlarge that, zero in and enlarge that picture, Eric? Would it be possible? Yes. This is an obelisk. It's hidden by all the trees that are growing there. This is in Paris Corner in Chennai. And it's very close to Fort St. George. You know, when the British arrived here in 1639, they were looking for a place where they could set up a warehouse, and they wanted a base for it. It actually started with trade. They were looking for muslin and cloth and all the other things. So they were given a small strip of land, a 3-mile strip of land, very close to the beach. And slowly in time, they built a fort close to the beach. And it was called Fort St. George because the construction was completed on the feast day of St. George. And after a while, you know, the French and the Dutch and other people were already here. The French East India Company and other East India companies. And then briefly in the 1700s, the French took over Madras, and the British had to shift their base to Cuddalore in the south of India. And then after some time, a treaty was formed and they exchanged places. So the French gave back Madras to the British. So after that, the British decided to create an esplanade, and they wanted to clear the area ahead of the fort. Prior to that, there was an area called Blacktown. All the residents inside the fort lived in what was called the White Town. And anything outside of the fort where the natives lived, the weavers and the washers and the potters and all of them, they were housed in an area called the Black Town. So after the French gave back Madras, the British cleared the entire Black Town there, and they lined up about 6 or 7 pillars and to draw out the boundary of what was called an esplanade. An esplanade is usually a long stretch where you can walk it by the beachfront, or it could be a clear area which offers you a clear view from the fort so that you have a clear field of fire. So there were actually at one point several pillars to mark the boundary of the esplanade. And beyond this was where Blacktown, the new Blacktown, came up. Out of this, all the pillars, all but one, this one of the pillars have remained. And this has happily been protected by the Murugappa group, which is a very prominent business group. And it is a very important marker of British history and the esplanade. And this area is called Paris Corner because there were 3 important business houses in the area: Arbuthnot Bank, Binnie's, and Thomas Parry, who came in as a free merchant. So these were the ABP. It was an acronym for the 3 prominent business houses in those days. And this boundary marker is preserved by the Murugappa group, who now occupy the space next to this obelisk. The next slide, Eric. Now, this is a statue of King George V. And Georgetown owes its name to King George V. When he was a Prince of Wales, he visited India, and eventually he became King George. And in honor of him, Blacktown was renamed Georgetown. And King George became King of England and also Emperor of India. And this is a statue that was erected by one of the Indians in honor of King George. It now has become a parking lot, but the statue remains, and it is safe until now. So this is how Georgetown, that was Blacktown, gets its name, and it's very close to Paris Corner and that boundary marker. It's in fact down the road where the boundary marker is. And the last slide, Eric. Almost every people of all nationalities have had some contact or the other with Madras. You saw the British, you saw the Scottish, you have the Dutch, the Danes, all of that. And now the Armenians also were one of the earliest settlers who came to Madras. They were dealing in, as usual, in spices, gems, and all the other things. They initially were operating on their own, and then they developed close ties with the British. They used to pray in a church that was inside Fort St. George. And later on, they would pay. They built a church entirely out of timber, just on the opposite side of where this church is. And then when their numbers grew and it became too unwieldy, and then the old Black Town was raised, they were given. They found this space. This was actually, this used to be their burial ground. And this was given to them by one of the rich Armenians. And this church is a beautiful church. It is in such a busy part of Madras, but it's a haven of peace once you step in inside. They brought back all the pews and the altar and from the old church. There are 6 bells, giant bells. There's in the bell tower. All the bells are from a foundry called Whitechapel Foundry in the UK, and which supplied the bells to St. Paul's Cathedral and the Big Ben and all of that. And there is a very, very small community that that attends church here, and it is really a beautiful place. Just for anybody, you know, to just go sit there, soak in, seek some solitude and commune with the Lord. So these are some of the places that I could wanted to showcase today to you about what you could find in your own backyard. Now I'm going to give you 5 minutes for you to come up with either a statue or a building or something else that you have in your backyard around which you can build a story. And then we will, so 5 minutes to just make your jottings, and then we can come back and share what we came up with and then decide how to develop it.
Well, Sudha, if you're just asking them to think about what's in their backyard, perhaps they don't need to go into breakout rooms. They
Okay.
can just stay here and
All right.
write for a few minutes.
Okay. So 5 minutes from now, Eric?
Okay. And and then if you like, you can invite them to go into breakout rooms, or you can invite them to share in the main room.
Yeah, they can share in the main room, Eric.
Okay, good. Okay, 5 minutes have passed.
Yes. So who'd like to go first? Anything that came up for you? Yeah, Veena's hand is up. Yes, Veena.
Time is short and such an interesting, I would say, lecture on the heritage buildings. That was wonderful, Sudha. You've given us a new angle to look at. We are members of the Sikandrabad Club, which is quite nearby to home. And for the past 5-7 years, we've been members and enjoying the facilities. So I thought that's something that I just looked up on the telephone and wrote. Beautiful British colonial building with, you know, those tall rounded pillars. And previously it did have a thatched roof with red tiles and all that. And there was another area, which is the bar and other places, which has a flat terraced roof, again with the not the barricade, the colonial, what do you say? Not hedging, I can't remember the word. Colonial, a wall around it. The big lawns right in front, and it's almost like, you know, I can hear the carriage coming up with the British soldiers and their whoever officer is getting down from their wonderful carriages and the horses and, you know, all those kind of things. So the entrance is like that. It was, it says here, it was built somewhere in the 26th of April, 1878. It was established. So it came, it is definitely a British period, but then later on, because of the Nizam rule in Hyderabad, it was passed down to the Nizam because it is his Jagir or his area of kingdom. And his descendants till today, I think, are given free membership and free entry and all those kind of things. It's very difficult to get entry into that club nowadays. Also, it now belongs into the cantonment area, GHMC, as they would say, Government Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. So it's not with the municipal corporation. It still rests in the cantonment area, which is again a British army area. Yeah. And the president is, I think, the chief of the armed forces, because that is now, the land is now leased, I think so. I have to look it up.
On long lease, usually
long
they take
lease.
it for 99 years.
Yes, so that it's not the land of the club, Sikandrabad. Now it is called Sikandrabad Club, but it had various names that it went through. The turning point. Here comes the turning point of the story. Just 4 years ago, I think on the 15th of January, 2022, not even 4 years ago, there was a massive fire early morning at 4 o'clock, massive fire, and it's gutted down the colonial part of the building. All the files and whatever things have been almost lost. And it's under repairs now. So people are not allowed to go there into that part of the building. And it housed the prized possessions of the Nizam, is his things that he got from the hunting and all those kind of things. So
it's
yeah,
such a pity.
I need to work up on that story. Thank you so much.
Yes, lovely. I think it's a great story. Has there been any coffee table book or anything that's been brought out on the club?
I'm sure there are so many.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this is going to take
1800s.
Going to take you on a very fascinating journey.
Very long
I can
journey.
assure you. Yeah. And it'll be a work in progress, but you know, don't let that deter you.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you come up with, I think is good to start with.
We live in the cantonment, so there are a lot of army housing colonies over here.
I'm wondering if the fire was engineered or
no,
it was a case of sabotage.
No. Probably old neglected part. Funding gone somewhere else.
Okay. Who would like to share next? There's Barry. Yes, Barry.
Yes, hi Sudha. Can everyone hear
Hi.
me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good, good. One thing that came to mind would be combining this with some kind of sustainability nature. I know I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, in the southern United States. There are creeks and there are parks. And there's one interesting one that is in kind of a nature preserve, but it has something called the Doll's Head Trail. And it is rather surreal and odd because it is a trail through the forest that has been marked with little heads of dolls and trinkets and old typewriters and tires, and it is a kind of a curated outdoor space. But the story of that is interesting. But actually, the other thing that came to mind, and it's a reason that I should not be here right now, is because I have a project that I'm working on that was due last Tuesday, a first draft. It's for a wetland center south of the city here. And they've commissioned several storytellers, writers to create pieces for an app for visitors to walk around. And I was going to do something about the flora and fauna, but then the coordinator said that a lot of people proposed that, and she asked me to do something about the Civil War history, about a couple of battles that took place in this particular community, during the American Civil War. And so I have been up to here in information about the left flank moving forward and the Ohio 7th Cavalry and Corporal this and Lieutenant that. And it's been very interesting, but I have to continue working on that story. But that's one where I'm kind of in my backyard a little bit. It's about 30 miles away, but trying to find it and how to shape it into an oral listening experience that I will probably be part of. But and it's a little bit more than storytelling because they have some budget, so there will be some production values available and different voices and so on. But that's what came to mind for me because it's right in front of my mind.
I think it's a very interesting assignment, Barry, and even your trail sounds. I think children will love it, children and adults. And wetlands we are beginning to realize the importance of wetlands. We have the Pallikarnai marsh here, which has shrunk vastly, where you have a lot of birds migrating. Now they're trying to restore all of that. We're learning from past mistakes. And this battles, the story of the battles that you're working on, I'm sure you have enough material in all your libraries, and it's going to take you on a absolutely fascinating journey.
That's the problem with historical narratives, and maybe when we find things in our backyard, how to shape and limit the story, because I have way too much material.
Maybe you can find some families who've had ancestors who served during that battle, find out if they have stories to tell.
I actually tried to join the 21st century and got on that new chatbot thing and asked it to create a little story, but it didn't.
Not a good idea.
Not good at all.
Yeah. I'm sure there are some groups that you can also speak to. Manjari? Yes. Manjari. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Usha, for that wonderful telling, and it gave us a lot of it was a lot of information about a city which I have visited once, but never really seen all these places you described. So it was a lot of information for me. I live at Malabar Hill, Mumbai, and there is what is called a Ban Ganga tank very close. And I just wanted to share with everybody about its history. And Ban Ganga tank is a temple tank, which is part of the Valkeshwar Shiva temple made in 1127. And it is very close here on Malabar Hill. And centuries later, the Portuguese invaders destroyed the temple, but it was renovated in 1715 along with the Ban Ganga tank. And the architect was Lakshman Prabhu. And it is a beautiful place where today there are some music programs around it. And it also has a mythological tale behind it. Lakshmana, brother of Ram of the Ramayana, shot an arrow into the ground, and water gushed forth from the ground, creating a tributary of the Ganges, which flows over 1,000 miles over. Hence its name, Ban Ganga. That is the Ganga created by a ban, that is an arrow. So that is what I wanted to share with you. Yeah.
Very nice. Even Bombay was a dowry, I think, given by somebody, right?
Yes, yes. Portuguese princess, yes. When she was married, it was given like a dowry. Yeah.
That's very nice. I think it's got all the, it's got mythology, it's got history, and all the other ingredients to make for a good story that you can put together, that you can
Yes.
piece.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Usually people just vanish when we say breakout rooms or ask them to come up with ideas. And Rachel, does this ring a
Yeah,
bell?
Bruce has his hand up.
Oh, Bruce, please go ahead.
Okay, Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to? No? Okay. Barry, you sound like you might not be from Atlanta originally.
New Jersey.
Sorry, we didn't catch that.
New Jersey, aha. I sensed you were from up this way somewhere. All right. A few things came to mind. One was my literal backyard. I live in a town 7 miles north of Boston, Massachusetts that is, well, it's incorporated as a city. And it's somewhere in between the urban area and the suburbs. It's tends to have small housing lots, but people do have yards. And I have one of the bigger yards probably in town. I have about 1/5 of an acre, kind of pizza shaped, with the house sited near the sidewalk, so it fans out and back. And there's a pretty good sized backyard there. And it's a nice place to hang out. People like to come over here for parties because it's a pleasant yard. It's not like a fancy suburban, beautiful backyard, but it's pretty decent. And I've seen my share of wildlife there. I've seen a flock of turkeys back there. I found salamanders and baby snakes. I've last summer a gray fox passed through a few times that I'm aware of. And so we've had our share of there've been raccoons, and we've had our share of wildlife, so that's been interesting. And at the back of the property, there used to be a 4 or 5 bay garage where people worked on cars. In fact, beyond the retaining wall that holds up the woods from the back of my yard, there's a car chassis back there. So there's got to be a pretty interesting history to this particular property. Thinking also locally, I have a friend in the area who is on the city council, who about 30 years ago started an initiative to build a local bike path. And as of this past winter, it's about 12 miles long and completely paved and being extended out to a beach along the ocean. So he's a fellow with some political savvy and an interesting fellow, and I thought maybe telling his story might be kind of worthwhile. And then I also thought of Frederick Law Olmsted, who is a famous landscape architect who lived in the United States. I don't know how long ago, something like a century or a century and a half ago, and he's responsible for Central Park in New York and many of the many other public parks and private properties. He's one of my heroes because he did a lot to really preserve and beautify a lot of spaces in the country, and his story would be worth telling. Sudha, I just want to mention that I think what you're doing is is pretty interesting because you're telling stories of a lot of things that people might not get to hear the stories about. And so you keep those stories alive, or you spread them more widely, and power to you and what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm glad it has, triggered ideas in your minds. And as I said, I can only say that it's fascinating because it just sucks you in, and it's wonderful. And then things happen. You meet people. It's very uncanny. I just can't explain it. When you're on this path, you're seeking information. People just land up on your doorstep, or something that catches your eye in the newspaper or something like that. It just supports your work. I think the universe does that. So we'll just quickly go to the last slide, Eric. Eric? Yes. Yes. So this is the last slide. So once we've generated an idea and zeroed in on something that we want to work on, the challenge is, where are we going to find all the information? So you can start with your libraries. You can talk to people. You can find out if books have been written. You can go to the archives. If some, like Barry was saying, he was talking about some battles. If there are families who've had older family members serve in those battles, talk to them. Talk to the oldest residents in that area, people who've lived very, very long in that area, or somebody who's done any particular research. Usually when it's about temples, we look at even the literature around it. If somebody has composed a hymn or a poem or something like that in honor of the deity in the temple, or the place of worship, that's a good place to look at. All the plaques, all the epigraphy is big now in India, because where people are exploring their surroundings and their buildings more. So any little bit of information that you can get is valuable. Of course, relying on the internet is very, very dicey, as we all know too well. We have to put it through a fact check and verify. You can't take anything that appears on the internet as the gospel truth. So I don't know about Chat GPT. I don't think it's going to help very much. It'll probably rehash what somebody has already written and package it, old wine in a new bottle kind of thing. So you just have to be your antenna have to be up all the time, and you have to be hungry for information. And of course, it's a daunting task. It's never done. You will always stumble upon new information. Be open to that, but never let it frustrate you that you don't know enough. Start with what you know, and I think you can really keep going. It's not wrong to say it's a work in progress, and that you're continually improving on stuff. So the tone of it, are you going to tell it as a fact-filled story, or are you going to make it a point of view story? What is the tone? Are you going to show and tell? You could do a nice presentation. You can display a lot of pictures. In fact, I would have shown you much more pictures, but then I didn't want the presentation to get too heavy. So I had to limit. I slashed down a lot of the pictures of the Armenian church and other places that I showed you. So it really depends on you, how you want to, your audience. If you're going to tell children the stories, or if you're going to tell it to adults, or is it going to be an after dinner thing or a club event? It depends on your audience. It depends on the occasion. Are you going to build in, pick on the turning points, the key turning points? What happened in this battle? What turned the tide in favor of one party, or was there any deeper conflict? All the other additional elements that add flavor to it. I think the choice is yours, and as creative people, I don't have to tell you or give you a checklist. I'm just sort of shooting off some ideas for you to think on, and I think yes, you're on to a good thing with all your ideas, and I hope you have a wonderful time discovering and building up on all of that. So if there's any feedback that you'd like to share, or any
Yes,
takeaways.
I would like to echo your point of well, as someone said, shaping the information into a story. Because you know, information is all around us. We have information overload, but to make it into a story is to give it a beginning, a middle, and an end, and to center it around usually at least one or more characters who you know, who are trying to do something, hoping to do something, wanting to do something. So that yearning is part of the human drama, and that's what turns information into a story.
Yes, Eric, that's a point that needs to be taken note of. But as I said, it depends on the subject. It depends on your audience. It depends on the occasion. And your point is well taken. It's a very important point. And you've always stressed on telling the story from one person's point of view to make it effective.
Well,
am I right?
That's just an option. When we go to the when we used to go to the statues along Marina Beach, yes. we would say, "I am Carnegie. This is my story."
Oh yes, I have to tell the audience about Eric. Usually does a curated walk along the Marina Beach, which is one of the longest beaches in the world, and there are several statues of characters from literature and historical, Carnegie and G.U. Pope. And Eric did a lot of work on the Carnegie Trail. So yeah. He curated a walk every year during Madras Week.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the thing is, when you tell, well, first of all, to complete that point about the statues, we didn't say, this is Carnegie, this is her story. No, we did an enactment of Carnegie, because when you tell the story from the point of view of the character, you get a very strong emotional connect with the character, and so do your listeners. But the other thing I wanted to say about statues is that somebody in the past has decided that this character is important for this place and for this population. So they, in effect, they have their statue or their plaque is a story, you know, as a three-dimensional story that they have placed in public space. So then we have the option, if we want to echo that, to tell the story of that statue or enact that statue. But that's an echo building on what the statue provider already provided. Regarding Marina Beach, which we all love so much, I went there yesterday, and from Bharatisalai to the lighthouse, it is totally, the area near the road has been taken over to build an underground train. And it seems to me some of the statues are no longer there. I'm not sure about that, but there was a wonderful cafe, one wonderful cafe that was there, which is now totally gone. So that whole area, and the roller skating rink is totally gone. So a great deal, many landmarks there at Marina Beach are gone because of this underground train construction project. So that was a big shock for me yesterday.
Very sad, Eric. Anyway,
Well,
let's not.
It remains to be seen, you know, what they'll do when the dust settles. But we've all appreciated for these many years that the urge to put Burger King and McDonald's and all the global fast food, that has been resisted at Marina Beach. There was one local cafe. So now we're going to see what happens after the construction. Let's hope for the best.
I don't even want to think about it. I think we have to form a citizens movement and protest against you know, degrading our prized possessions. So how many minutes do we have, Eric? I think we're almost done.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. Rachel, you want to say something? Rachel has her hand up.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I learned a
Thank
lot.
you.
Excuse me. And I liked all of the other presentations also. So it was very rich. Thank you.
Can you just repeat what you said? I couldn't catch half of it.
Oh,
You
I said
it-
thank you. I said thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed the slides and all of the information you conveyed. And then I also enjoyed hearing everybody else's
Yes.
writings.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sudha. That was wonderful.